Hello and welcome to On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is. On February 6th, 2019, I released the episode of And the Runner-Up Is on the 1976 Best Picture race, where we discussed Network as the likely runner-up that lost Best Picture to Rocky. But on second thought, what if the runner-up was really All the President's Men? Hello, and welcome back to On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is, where we discuss another Best Picture nominee that we did not cover on the main show. Today we are going back to 1976 and examining if maybe it wasn't Network that was the runner-up to Rocky, but instead another movie sort of about media, All the President's Men. So, joining me today, I have two fabulous guests who feels like it's been a little bit since I've had them both on, but I'm excited to have them on. Again, my first guest you've heard talk about Boyhood, Tender Mercies, The Barretts of Wimpole Street. What a combo. You also heard him on a few episodes of On Second Thought about The Fighter and Good Will Hunting. Please welcome back from The Insider and Not Her Again podcast, Michael Domanico.
Hello. I'm just continuing my winning streak here. Tender Mercies, Barretts of Wimpole Street, just all the hits. This is actually a hit. So
it actually is, yeah. You're not wrong. And my other guest, you've heard talking about Pulp Fiction and Sayonara. And The Grapes of Wrath, another great combo. And an episode of On Second Thought about Inglourious Bastards. Please welcome back from In Session Film and Awards Watch and Busting the Block and all kinds of other things, Ryan McQuade.
It's so wonderful to be back. It's been a long time since I've done On Second Thought.
Yeah.
I felt like I only could talk about Quentin Tarantino films or things with dust in them. So... yeah. I don't think there's a lot of... well, maybe there's dust on the typewriters, but it's so wonderful to be back, Kevin. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Yes. I'm excited to have you both on for, again, movies that are like more outside of the wheelhouse that I've randomly put you in. Which, for Michael Domanico, has weirdly been like the white working class.
And this movie kind of... I mean, I don't think they were making a ton of money back in those days.
Yeah. Feels like a different vibe.
Movie was made.
Yeah, they're like in McDonald's a lot in this movie.
Yeah.
They're hanging out a lot there.
That's true. And for Ryan, something that's not Tarantino. How about that?
I was like, well, look, Kevin knows I have no problem talking about Tarantino with him. But I also like other films. So there's that.
Yes. You are more complex. Yes. Yeah. All right.
For sure.
Let's jump right in. We're talking All the President's Men. We got a lot to talk about, so no time to waste. All right. So, All the President's Men is a political drama about Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who are the Washington Post journalists who broke the Watergate scandal, which, for those who somehow do not know at this point, involves the Nixon administration essentially ordering a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters and their subsequent attempts to cover it up. So the film basically goes through the entire process of Woodward and Bernstein investigating the incident and putting the pieces together to uncover the big conspiracy. So the film was directed by Alan J. Pakula and written by William Goldman, who was adapting Woodward and Bernstein's book of the same name. And it stars Robert Redford as Bob Woodward, Dustin Hoffman as Carl Bernstein, Jack Warden, Martin Balsam, Hal Holbrook, Jason Robards, Jane Alexander, and a whole bunch of other great 70s people that it's too much to name. So, All the President's Men made $70 million at the U.S. box office, a marginal hit for 1976, and it was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, winning 4, but not Best Picture. All right, All the President's Men. Let's go over to Michael first. Michael, What are your thoughts on this classic?
Yeah, so I'm a really big fan of this movie. I think, it's a movie that is really interesting where, you're building up to this thing where you obviously where it's going, right? Like, that Nixon is going to eventually resign. So they have to find a way to like ratchet up the tension when the outcome is like, oh, by the way, like this investigation doesn't cover what we all know. And I think the movie does a really good job of that. Like, I think it really shows you kind of both the hard work that you have to put in as a journalist to find this kind of story, but also a lot of just kind of like the luck. Like, sometimes there are just things that kind of break in your favor and you were in the right place at the right time, or you knew someone who knew someone who dated someone, and you're like, oh, perfect. And I think that this movie does a really good job of making you feel that kind of escalating tension as they start to get closer to uncovering what's really going on, even though, again, it's like a foregone conclusion how it all ends. And I think what the movie also does really great is that it has this sort of anti-climax where it's like, they write this story and it's kind of wrong. Like, they write this really big expose and they realize that they got some of the facts wrong and they have to go back and figure out, where they had been maybe misled, or they had misinterpreted things, or their people had told them the wrong thing. And I think that is also a great kind of hallmark of 70s cinema. I think that that's something that you maybe didn't see as much in the 50s and 60s. It was kind of like the good guys, like they win in this movie in the long run, but in the actual movie, it's like their big story comes out and they're all like, we have to, that wasn't the hit that we thought it was going to be. And then it's almost like a coda at the end of like, oh yeah, and then all of this leads to all these people getting indicted, pleading guilty, Nixon resigning, etc. And I think that's just a really bold choice to make, where it's not this like big hurrah of a movie. It's sort of this it's like this anticlimax where it's, you're in there and you're really feeling it, and, they're getting so close, and then they don't really hit where they're supposed to land. And yeah, I think that the aesthetics of the movie are great. I think that was very much the director's style, to do a lot of these like dimly lit corridors. A lot of things are in shadow. The entire first scene is amazing, the way it's shot. The burglary or the break-in at the Watergate Hotel. But yeah, it's a really great movie. I think that it's working on a lot of levels. We'll get into the acting. I feel like I'm talking too much, but the acting is also superb. But yeah, like overall, really, really big fan of this movie.
Yes, very good. What about you, Ryan?
I love that he says, I'm talking too much, and then he doesn't know that he's podcasting with me. But no, I saw All the President's Men when I was like in elementary school. I was that weird kid that asked my dad, I want to watch something like this. And so I've loved this film for a long, long time. And I think it's just aged well over the years that I've grown up with it, because it's meant different things. Growing up, obviously, within like the Bush administration, and a lot of the uncovery of the wrong things within the tubes and everything that goes on there, and sort of in the that film Fair Game with Naomi Watts about Valerie Plum and everything that happened with there, that sort of feels a little bit akin to what happened here. And then obviously what happened in the last 4 years with where, the truth. This movie is entirely about the truth and getting to that. I mean, you literally have Jason Robards' character being, I think, the antithesis of what Tom Hanks is in The Post, which is he's being such a hard ass on them in saying, you don't have this story. If we publish this, we could go under. I mean, that's how much power the White House, Nixon, the paranoia, everything of that time. If you screwed it up, you were done. And these two guys would be, drawing cartoons probably for the rest of their lives, and, covering bake sales. And instead, these guys took their time. They, like Michael said, they lucked into a lot of things, but that's sort of the nature of the game. In any sort of journalism, you luck into it. I mean, we luck into interviews and predictions and things of that nature in our game. So it's very much not the same thing, because they're uncovering facts about a terrible break-in and a horrible, President Richard Nixon. But I just love how it's all paced. Pakula is he had this Paranoia trilogy, and this is sort of the capper of that. And it's the height of all that. And I love the way he shoots everything that's just normal conversations, but really takes it to another level. Obviously we'll talk about the acting, which is superb, and it's just a perfect cast. Redford and Hoffman's, their chemistry is off the charts, insane. And it's for a movie that really does feel like Hollywood, would try to really heighten it. It does feel really grounded at a lot of it. It just feels like these two guys trying to put a puzzle together. And I love so much of the film is just them having conversations, going over the same notes. There's scenes of paranoia. There's seeds of doubt spread throughout the film. There's Hal Holbrook, in the dark. There's all these little things that just I love so much about it. And it's the film I thought about the most during the last 4 years. And because of the fact that I think we don't have a lot of these two journalists anymore. We don't have, and I mean, literally, we had Bob Woodward doing books about the Trump administration, which is weird. It's like we should have somebody else doing that, but they were the best of the best. And like Michael said, they messed up, but they went back and fixed it. And I like that because that shows that it's not just like, oh, let's, they solved the case, let's move on. Life's a lot more difficult than that is. So I love the film.
Beautiful. Wow. You both had a lot to say right away. I love it. So first of all, from my angle, I just want to point out how wild it is that we have these two films this year, All the President's Men and Network, that are able to just say so much about contemporary times at that time, because this was only like 4 years after this happened, which is wild to think about. They're able to say so much about media and the state of the world and corruption and just all of our broken systems, basically. And they also both have kind of an unsettling quality to them, but All the President's Men especially, because Alan Shea Pakula, as Ryan was saying, absolutely specialized in this with things like this and The Parallax View and Clute. Really, really fun kind of filmography to watch if you were to watch them all in a row. But I don't think it necessarily glamorizes the world of journalism like a lot of movies and shows do to this day. And it's just, very much about the methodical process of building a story, finding sources, corroborating those sources, and sometimes screwing up, but really putting in the work and just really going up against a major force, but doing so in a way that isn't sensationalist, like I said. The idea that these guys are just doing their jobs and they're pouring everything into their jobs. And I think it's a very conscious choice that Pakula is making by just sort of focusing on the case and not really worrying about the need for like their backgrounds or their personal lives, mainly because with the amount of hours they're putting in, I don't really think they have personal lives. So I think that it's very well handled, and I also think the mood and the atmosphere is so essential in showing us just how dangerous this story is, with so many people involved, so many lives are on the line, honestly on both sides, both with the reporters and with the administration, that the paranoia and the eeriness of the mood is very, very effective. And we'll certainly get to the Oscar wins and nominations, but the fact that it wins for things like sound and art direction, when those are two categories that a film like All the President's Men these days would definitely not win, I would imagine, is very exciting to me. So yeah, I actually, when I look at this film, because I've seen it many times and I know about Watergate, I find myself more drawn in by the actual technical craft that's on display, more so than just the story, because I know what's going to happen. So I just find myself admiring how he puts that all together, how he's able to really dramatize this story without glamorizing it, which is a very tricky thing to do, apparently, for a lot of Hollywood producers and such.
Imagine if you didn't know how it was going to end. You were just saying like, "Oh, I know the Watergate stuff." Like, imagine showing this movie to someone who didn't. It would be like, "Wow, this is going to blow your mind."
Yeah.
Yeah, like when I watched it when I was a kid, like
Yeah.
I did not know, so I'm like on the edge of my seat.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, oh
Gonna
my God,
happen,
I'm learning
Scott.
history. But I mean, like, you're right, Kevin. That they don't glamorize journalism here. I mean,
Yeah.
like, that's what I think a lot of people loved about Spotlight,
That's
right?
what I was
Or
going to
that,
bring up too.
you
Yeah.
Yeah.
know,
Yep.
they that film was like, oh look, it's like a modern day All the President's Men, and it's like, yeah, but there's still Oscar scenes in that. Like there's still, like Mark
Mark
Ruffalo.
Ruffalo.
It's time.
They let
You
it
know what I mean?
happen.
They let it happen, and they knew. There's stuff like that. But like in this film, I guess it's just like because Robards is so laid back,
Yeah.
like him just yelling at them feels like any editor that we've ever encountered probably yelling at us. And so, I mean, there's just like Robert Redford going through phone books and calling all these people and having to remember the damn area codes that these people are at. Like Hoffman flying in and speaking with Ned Beatty, if I'm not mistaken, and
Yes.
and he's in this and Network.
Rest in
But
peace,
like
Ned
literally
Beatty.
sitting, like a whole scene is just him sitting waiting to talk to him. Like it's
Right.
all the little mundane things, but they add so much tension and drama to it all. It all just sort of bubbles to the top to then finally at the end you're like, oh please God, tell me, like when they get to Bradley's desk, like please tell me they're good enough to write this story. Like even as we know all this, you're still rooting for these guys and you're rooting for the truth to be uncovered even though you know where the subject ends. And it's not like they have to show Nixon or they have to show all the trial or anything. It's not like, Aaron Sorkin wrote this thing or anything. Like they literally just put on a news, line that all this is happening. And that's the way the movie ends. That's so fitting for this movie because it's effortless how much you're just satisfied. And it's also just a better way than just putting up text on a screen. It's really sort of very newsy, and that it is just news that you would presume that they are writing about. Like they would write about all these events and then they would move on to the next job.
Yeah.
Like they wouldn't like pat themselves on the back, or they're writing the book, obviously, probably off screen or whatever, but they're probably going to do the next job, which is not sexy in Hollywood, but it's the facts.
Yeah. Which is another big comparison with Spotlight, is a very similar vibe at the end of that film as well. But some of my favorite parts of this movie are the scenes that are just Woodward and Bernstein just talking to a source and just trying to extract information out of them. And the way that they're just able to just very subtly, or I mean sometimes unsubtly, sort of manipulate the conversation to just get what they need. Just in the little small talk, especially in between, as throwaway and as meaningless as some of that is, as far as like asking for a cup of coffee or like talking about someone's kid, those little moments do go a long way in getting people to open up and be more comfortable. I also think you believe it more just as an audience when it happens to be Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford. Just saying, like maybe that one element is a tiny bit glamorized compared to reality. No offense to Woodward and Bernstein, who are not exactly just like monsters looking, but I'm just saying,
they
like, it's
impede
Robert
sexuality in their
Yeah.
I mean, they impede sexuality in their writing, Kevin. How dare you?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
I mean,
but it's hard to dramatize that in a film, I suppose.
no fair.
I just think, you believe it more just as an audience when it happens to be Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, who's just a Greek god at this point in his career, that like obviously you're just gonna spill everything in his company. Let's just talk about their performances, because they are not nominated. This is a really interesting thing, because something that I've really been discovering in doing this show is that, these kinds of performances that are very workmanlike feeling and don't have the traditional speeches, even though I think that they are better in terms of serving the movie that they are in, the fact that they're too good means that they don't get nominations more often than not. because if you do have the big kind of Mark Ruffalo speeches, for example, then you're just way more likely to get that. And you see that obviously with Network and all of the loud speeches that come from that film, as great as that movie is. There's just a night and day difference, I think, in performance style. But what do you guys think of their actual performances?
Yeah, I mean, I think Redford to me stands out a little bit more. I just think Hoffman is a little bit more in the background. He does really good work. He's just a little bit more secondary. This is a little bit more of Robert Redford's movie. But yeah, I totally agree. And it goes back to something that you were saying where, there's no scene where Robert Redford is like, oh, like I have to work late and my girlfriend's mad at me. Like there's none of that like tension, right? Like they don't have that like personal life stuff going on that could have led to some of those scenes of like, like a tense argument with a partner about like the hours that you're working and like some speech about how important the work is or what, there's just none of that. Right. So yeah, like I think that the performances are great. Like I think again, Robert Redford to me is a little bit more of the star here. I think that I love the way that he approaches, like just the way that he modulates himself to different people.
Right, exactly.
One of my favorite scenes is when he's talking to Dustin Hoffman and he's like, oh, here's what we'll do. We'll fake her out and we'll say, oh, we know, you say, can you tell us who P is? And we'll say, oh, we know P is Porter. Like, we don't have to bother her about that. And then they cut to them doing that scene and it's just like, it's great watching them do it. And he just like has this way about him where, like you were saying, like he's Dustin Hoffman always comes off a little bit more as the aggressive reporter, I think. And Robert Redford is the one who I think knows to reel people in a little bit more gently. And it's great kind of watching them do that. And the way that he acts with Bradley versus Bernstein versus the sources. Like, it's just great watching him kind of figure out how far can I push this person or not. Like there's that one scene with Deep Throat where he's kind of pushing him, saying like toward the end where he's like, you actually do just have to tell me things at this point.
Drop the riddles and the bullshit. Yeah.
We're kind of getting to a point, but at first he's like very deferential to him.
Right.
And there's another scene where he is like a little bit too honest with Bradley, and then Hoffman's like, you shouldn't have said that. Like you should just be vague. You should always be vague with your boss. Don't tell them what's actually going on. Just kind of be like, sure. And it's great kind of watching him figure that out and, get more assertive in some places and also figure out how to like manage up with his editors. So yeah, like I think Redford's the standout. It's not to say Hoffman's not doing good work. I think he's doing really great work. I just think that Redford to me is the one that maybe like missed the nomination.
Yeah, I agree with Michael. I mean, this is probably my favorite Robert Redford performance, just because of the fact that, first of all, he's just a dreamboat in this movie. Like, I mean, for you're right, Kevin. Like, he's like he's like, are all reporters supposed to be this sexy? I mean, like, for God's sakes.
Like, it almost takes you out of the movie when you're first seeing him. It's like, oh, Jesus.
Well, yeah. You're like, that office must be at like 68 degrees because like he walks in and turns it into like 75 because he's so hot. But
that blonde hair.
Yeah, I know, right? But what I love about it is he's like the more naive one, and like I would say he's the more middle of the road, and like Bernstein's more of the the progressive, I guess you could say, or the more out there spoken and of the bunch. And I love their first sort of interaction where Woodward's typing up his notes and how he saw it from the day, and then Bernstein like takes them and he's reading them and he's just like, no, and he just goes back over to his desk and starts writing it. And there's sort of like a standoff divisiveness about it, and he hands them all the notes and he goes, if you think you can do this better, do it, just don't miss the facts, don't put yourself in there, put the facts in there. And then it's that great scene of, hey, the two of you're doing this together, anyway, have a good day. And you just and they just look at each other, and then they're a team after that point. But I love him in the courtroom, because like there's the three, it's almost like a comedy rule of three there, where he just like goes to that guy 3 times, and the guy just like, the guy's face, the lawyer's face is just like, are you kidding me? Like, what did I just say? Leave me alone. but it is sort of like a template of what we see for him, is that it's that persistence that he has, that he's afraid to really do a lot with a lot of other people. And yet he did it in the beginning. So it's now, because the story's getting bigger and bigger, he starts becoming more and more cautious. And I like that, as well as like the sort of turning the table on the witness. Like, oh, you're going to say this one thing, do those. Or I think what's one of my favorite scenes of the film is when he's calling the people. I think it's the night of the convention, and he's calling all the different people, and it's switching back and forth, and he confuses a name of one person he has with another because he's so dumbfounded at the fact that he's getting all this information via the telephone. People are willing to give this to him, and that's pure. Obviously they know all these facts, but it just feels like it's so pure within the moment for Redford, and it's effortless. Like it just comes so naturally to him to have that sort of human interaction. And look, I think Dustin Hoffman's great in this, but it is clearly Bob Woodward's film to me. Like, I mean, they have all those scenes with Deep Throat, the stuff at the beginning. Yeah, they have, Hoffman come in and really sort of become a two-hander by the middle of the film. But a lot of it is told through, Woodward's perspective and everything, because he had that big contact of Deep Throat.
Thank you for listening to this preview of On Second Thought, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more, please go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup.is and become a patron. Only $3 a month will get you access to bonus episodes, a Slack channel, and early access to regular episodes. Thank you so much for your consideration.